Good morning, everyone. Let's wait about 30 seconds just for a few more people to join. Okay, so good morning and welcome to our webinar on phase 2 of Making Tax Digital. We can move on to the next slide. I'm Alison Birch, the VAT partner at Mitchell Charlesworth, and I'm joined today by Neil and Guy from Tax Systems. So if you want to say hello, guys, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Alison. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, likewise.
Okay, so let's move on to the agenda. So this is what we're going to be covering today. I'm going to be going over the new rules that are coming in, and Neil and Guy will be covering some of the challenges, how to make MTD an opportunity and demonstrate some fantastic software. If you have any questions, please put these in the comments and we will answer these at the end of the webinar. So let's get started. Next slide, please. So before we talk about phase 2, let's briefly recap on HMRC's vision and phase 1. So MTD was introduced to automate tax reporting to reduce avoidable errors, which HMRC believed contributed to a significant tax gap. The first phase started in April 2019, and businesses within the scope of MTD had to keep certain records and accounts in a digital format and submit their VAT returns via API-enabled software. Businesses that have relatively straightforward VAT profiles and use API-enabled software may already have a fully automated VAT return process and may not be hugely impacted by phase 2. However, many businesses were not able to fully automate their VAT return process immediately. HMRC recognised that this was a significant change for business and allowed for a 12-month soft landing period. This period was actually extended by another 12 months because everyone was a little bit busy with COVID-19. And this now commences from the 1st of April 2021, so not long away at all. So let's move on to look at phase 2. So this is essentially finalising the digital journey. This means that once data has been entered into the software that's used to keep digital records, any further transfer or modification of the data used to prepare the VAT return must be done digitally, so there is a full digital audit trail. The process cannot involve cut and paste or any manual amendments. So a digital link is obviously the key part of this, so let's have a look at what that is. So HMRC state that a digital link is one where a transfer or exchange of data is made or can be made electronically between software programs, products or application. That is without the involvement or need for manual intervention, such as the copying over of information by hand or the manual transposition of data between two or more pieces of software. So essentially, this is if you've got a transfer of data within a business, if it has multiple systems, or a transfer of data to a tax agent if they are helping prepare the VAT return. I've listed on the slide examples of digital links. So this could be linked cells in spreadsheets, emailing or transferring via portable digital device, or API or other uploads and downloads. So if we can go on to the next slide, we'll just give an example of what isn't allowed anymore. So on screen, you'll see that reverse charge transactions are being added into the VAT return process manually, and this obviously is no longer permitted and will need to be automated. There are still going to be some permitted manual adjustments. So for example, partial exemption, fuel scale charges, and also I think some people were worried that you were no longer able to key in invoices at the initial stage when you create your digital record, but this is still permitted because this is before the digital journey starts. So if we just move on to the next slide. So during phase 1, everyone had a bit of a panic thinking that it was the end of Excel. And it really isn't. Excel is permitted and it does comply with HMRC's requirements as long as you have appropriate digital links. But there is obviously, as a word of warning, errors can occur if formulas are not done correctly, if links are outdated, and obviously the spreadsheets will require regular maintenance. So it's definitely worth considering whether this is the right solution for your business. And Neil or Guy, did you want to add anything at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of the biggest things that I often come across. We often see issues with sort of client Excels that may be digitally linked, but ultimately are containing calculation errors. And because essentially Excel's only as reliable as the underlying formulas. And actually by utilizing technology, we can start applying tax logic and actually validating those calculations to try and drive towards a more reliable and accurate return. And generally, that's kind of a move that we're seeing as sort of HMRC comes with phase 2, and also the sort of wider movement of digitization of the VAT process.
Fantastic, thanks. So Neil, I'm going to hand over to you now, if that's okay.
Yes, Alison, thank you very much. So in terms of helping understand who might be affected, there's a really good tool that we use when advising our clients as well. And that's, we like to bucket them into different tranches of work. And we've got one here which we'll classify as a simple bridge client who could be using a desktop accountancy software such as Sage 50 or equivalent, and then using an API bridging tool to HMRC. The second bucket is a simple cloud client who could be using a similar process, but using something like Xero, QuickBooks, Sage 1, Twinfield, Free Agent, but they're able to submit through an integrated API in their cloud software. And then finally, we have a third bucket who we'll call complex bridge. And these clients or these organizations, for whatever reason, it could be their data complexity or their VAT processes, they require some amendments, some adjustments on spreadsheets before submitting to HMRC and a bridging tool. And with MTD phase 2, it's these organizations that are at risk of non-compliance. So we've referenced the word complexity. It's a good idea just to dig a little further into what complexity actually means. So the top two, really important, because it's not necessarily about sectors or size. It really boils down to what's going on under the bonnet, as it were. And we can look at VAT complexity and data complexity first. Top left, things like VAT groups, partial exemption, whether it be a standard or a PESM. You've got reverse charges, both domestic, international. I know the CIS reverse charges come into construction recently. Manual adjustments, whatever they could be, guy reference, fuel scale charges, bad debt, whatever it is. All this adds a layer of complexity into their process. The data complexity, on the other hand, is all about multiple sources of data or ERP systems, or the quality of that data being poor, and the amount of manual data checks required. And these really represent some of the tip of the iceberg, because underneath these issues or these complexity stems more issues as well. So you've got the amount of time spent collating, reviewing, submitting the return and the data. You've got the key person dependency on spreadsheets, and with that, a siloed team and a lack of cross-team collaboration. We're also seeing a clear demand that VAT has been quite an ancient or old style version, and it needs to be automated. There's a desire here to streamline and automate processes in line with other processes that exist within a business. And of course, with that comes data insight, analytics, and the demand to reduce risk. So, Alison, this one is back over to you.
Thanks very much. So as we mentioned at the start, businesses that have all their records in accounting software that calculates and submits the return should already be meeting the digital requirements. However, now is the time to review to make sure that if any adjustments or amendments are made to the final VAT return figure, whether this is permitted, and if it's not, then action is obviously going to be required. Any business that has a more complex profile, so as we've just kind of covered, multiple pieces of software, complex adjustments to determine the VAT position or combining VAT returns for VAT group purposes, are going to need to go through a process of reviewing their end-to-end VAT return to identify any manual intervention and how they are going to address that. As we've said, Excel is permitted, but not always reliable. So the next slide, the question that's going to be asked by lots. So, sorry, the level of risk, that was obviously covered in the previous bit. So it is about determining what action you need to take. So yes, so going on to the big question, can you defer? In theory, yes, but unlikely. HMRC are being strict about this and requiring businesses to do detailed mapping to request a deferral and explain why the digital link fails and why it is unachievable to have a digital link as part of their VAT return process. HMRC have made it quite clear that they're not going to accept cost as a reason. And also, if there's commercially available software that will solve their issue, they are unlikely to grant any extensions. So examples, as it says on the screen, that they may consider is if a if a business is in the middle of an IT or ERP implementation, there's been delays, then they may consider granting a deferral. And also, if there's been a recent acquisition of a business which is taking a little bit of time to integrate into the accounting system, they may consider that. But it's absolutely not guaranteed. So unfortunately, businesses are going to need to take this step. Okay, I think that's back to you now, Neil.
Thank you, Alison. So it's worth now looking at this through a different lens and what MTD is, but also how it can possibly be an opportunity for you as well. So we're coming up to one of our busiest slides, so forgive me, but please bear with me. We just talk through this very high level. HMRC is driving businesses to adopt technology and digitize processes. We know the tax gap's about 34 billion, with a significant amount of that due to negligence or not taking relevant care. HMRC has an objective to become one of the #1 technologically advanced tax authorities in the world. And when you look at where they sit against some areas of Europe or South America, it's clear that they're much further behind than they would like to be, and even we think they are as well. So HMRC is not a trailblazer in many ways. It's actually trying to drag the UK economy and UK businesses into the 21st century. So if we look at historically where processes are looked in silos, it's no longer possible to look at these. We've got MTD at the top here, the business risk review, CCO, SAO, everything is overlapping quite significantly. And if you're approaching either MTD for VAT phase 2 with a sticky plaster approach, then have you covered controls? Is there still key person dependency? If so, how does that affect your level of risk? By just ticking one of these, or a box for one of these, you are potentially leaving yourself exposed to another. And that doesn't take into account what's happening outside of HMRC and in our professional and personal lives. If we look at MTD for that in a silo, then we miss the bigger picture again, with MTD for CT coming in soon, a whole drive for cloud technology over the last 10 years, fueled again with COVID, remote working, hybrid working is here to stay. So we've got cloud technology, API, system integration, digital efficiencies, business risk being reduced through cloud and automated software. We haven't even scratched the surface of what open banking will do for transactional level compliance. And of course, we've got post-COVID tax and penalty regimes, as well as the idea about workload and capacity and what that means on using suitable software for attracting and retaining staff. So here's what the market is telling us, very high level. We'll work down the left. Tax teams were spending far too much time on VAT returns, with up to 75% on data collection. Many had concerns regarding their VAT process using current MTD software, and as Guy alluded to as well, there's errors even if there are links, with a lack of confidence in reporting. And on the other side of the coin, and very much in line with what HMRC are trying to do and drag firms and organizations all the way up, is we are looking at automation. 72% thought automation would benefit their processes. And in line with what's happening with the wider MTD rollout, there is a significant proportion of respondents looking to automate the whole tax function by 2024. So what we're going to look at next is a solution like AlphaVat, which is a compliance solution to help you if you fit one of those buckets. So we've got here in the middle AlphaVat, which is a compliance engine. So if we look on the left-hand side, you've got your ERP systems, whatever they are, you can be completely agnostic. You can take that source data and put it into an engine. AlphaVat will allow you to create digital links. It will allow you to clean the data, automate large parts of the process, and save a significant amount of time. All this will then flow and allow you to submit a 9-box return automatically and with data and insights as well. So that's in a nutshell what a solution on the market can do to help you. And just to bring that to life in a bit more detail, Guy's going to run you through a little flavor of that in action as well.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Neil. So, at its core, as Neil said, AlphaTax is all about taking the data that you're producing as part of your sort of return process, and rather than manipulating it in Excel, we're going to load it into a sort of cloud environment where we have audit trails, we have the ability to sort of do data analytics, data checks, and have a really robust sort of evidence chain of that digital linking and anything that's occurred as part of the process. So from our initial screen here, when we are managing our entities and setting up our groups and returns, we can select an entity to start the process of actually building the 9-box summary. So the first step, as you'd expect, is uploading data. Once that's uploaded, you can see here this client has an example of a purchase ledger and a sales ledger. We can then start thinking about the process of sort of data cleansing. So whether that means investigating if we've got any business entertaining that needs to be blocked, if we've got intergroup transactions that need to be excluded from the return, or if we've got some corrections that we need to post. We've got incorrect tax codes that have been applied that need to be edited and changed, or misstated VAT amounts that need to be updated. You can see here in this example of an original transaction and then its updated version where we've reallocated that tax code, and then there's a timestamp and a clear indication of what's being done. And that's really the digital linking that HMRC are looking for, that where you are making changes, there's absolute clarity as to who made those changes, when they were made, and what the changes were. So next, we can move on to the mapping part of the project. And this is really where our implementation team build up a lot of the automation. It's where they look at the way in which you're taking your underlying transactions and feeding them through into your final 9 boxes and taking into account all of the adjustments and calculations along the way. So here you can see we've got a selection of column headers mapped in, which essentially just means that, especially if you've got multiple ERP systems, we've got a good cohesive set of column headers that we can then use to calculate the return as well as our data checks. Next, all we're trying to do is ensure we've got the correct transactions flowing into the correct boxes using filters and rules to ensure that we're reflecting the process currently completed in Excel. So once we're happy with all of that, we can move on to our first 9-box summary. And at this stage, it's really the first cut of the return, but it's nice to have an indication of where we currently are before we start thinking about any adjustments we need to post and before we start actioning those data checks that we've got within the software. And so all of our data checks sit within this transaction section on the left-hand side. I can open those up and review them from here. Within AlphaVat, we have both standard checks and we allow for your own custom check creation. So you can see here our standard checks include things like transactions outside the return period to try and capture data that's been incorrectly uploaded from previous periods, but also so that you can go through a process of approving timing differences such as late invoices. We're also capturing duplicate transactions and also unexpected VAT rates where we're seeing sort of misstated rates coming through. And then finally, as I said, you have that ability to start creating your own bank of custom checks. And often that's either replicating checks that you're already performing, or it can often be a case of these are the checks that we'd really like to be able to perform to be comfortable and happy with the result of our return process. And so in that situation, we can build those in for you as well. As I said, once you've gone through all of those checks, you can review the data, you can post adjustments where you need to and changes to that data. We can then think about those manual adjustments we need to put through as well. As we mentioned earlier, these typically include things like bad debt adjustments, fuel scale charge, capital goods schemes, things like that. Where earlier on in the process, we look to automate things like partial exemption, special or standard method, reverse charge, postponed VAT accounting. This tends to be the more sort of anecdotal items. And to post these, all we need to do is select Add Adjustment, give our net or VAT amounts and a description for the adjustment we're making. And then the important part is adding our supporting documentation. And really what we're doing here is we're ensuring that all of the data all the sort of the information that is part of this manual adjustment. So whether that's sort of an example of an Excel where we calculated that adjustment, it's included as part of this posting. So that if HMRC, as part of their sort of VAT audit or inspection, want to find out a little bit more information as to why this adjustment couldn't be included as part of the digitally linked process, you've got all the data you need to prove it. Now, to make sure that AlphaVat is going to be matched up and properly accounting for any data changes that occur within it, so stripping up those duplicate transactions or posting edits, we also have the reconciliation reports available. And these can then be used to flag up those data changes so that you can account for them in the next period and strip them out of your ERP system. Now, once we're happy with that, and before we submit, the last bit of functionality worth investigating is the reporting available at this 9-box level. So you can see here, if I want to drill down into my box 4, I can simply select it to get a line-by-line breakdown of the different inputs. So I can see my adjustments, the blocked inputs that we blocked at that earlier upload stage, as well as my purchases themselves. And then from here, if I want to view any of these at a transactional level, I can click these again to see that breakdown. You'll see now I see all of my sort of line-by-line purchases in all of their detail, which can then obviously give me the comfort that they're feeding through into the right place, but also give HMRC the comfort that that digital link is present. Now, once we're happy with our return, we've posted our adjustments, completed our data checks, and reconciled whatever we need to, we can submit the return itself. Hit ready to submit. It'll take us back to the summary screen for this entity. If it's a single filer, it's just going to submit directly to HMRC from here. And if it's part of a group, instead you'd be marking it as ready for consolidation. And then it'll roll up to that lead or representative member where you can then submit it as a group return. But the process itself is relatively similar. But now, once the return's submitted, you can see we've got our standard receipt. We can always go back and access any of the reports or the information that we had access to before as part of the return. The only thing we can't do is edit or upload any new data. Now, to bring a little bit more value to the return, and this is a kind of an approach that we're taking across all of our products, we have 4 additional tabs across the top here that try and either bring more value to the process or make the process a bit more holistic. And this first one, our documents section, what this does is it contains all of the files uploaded as part of those manual adjustments, but also it allows you to upload sort of process guidance or controls that need to be monitored and checked, or anything else that is a part of the return that you'd like to have in a single place so that you don't need to worry about between shared drives or other locations for it. Within the entity summary section, we've got high-level information about the entity in question, as well as obligation data pulled from HMRC's portal. And on the right-hand side, we have our data checks as well, where you can either enable or disable our standard ones or start creating your own custom checks. Within payments and liabilities, we're pulling detail from HMRC's portal down to our software to show you those liabilities, payments, and outstanding amounts. So anything that you're owed by HMRC, if you're lucky enough to be in a reclaim position, or anything you owe to them, it's going to keep you updated on those outstanding amounts and really make sure that you're on top of everything. Now, finally, we have an analytics piece, which is most valuable when we've got a few periods of data uploaded to the return section. And you can see here, once I go into my analytics screen, and I've got a few quarters of data uploaded, it becomes a really interesting journey. I can select any prior quarter and compare it to the previous period or the same period a year ago. Within the first box, I can then look at the movement of those 9 boxes, both the value and the percentage change, to help monitor sort of seasonal business, periods of exceptional expenditure, or just staying in line with target or budgets. And then beneath there, we've got 2 more reports, one on our total VAT payable for the year, and another on our sort of granular data summary. And here we're looking at total transactions, anything blocked, excluded, removed, and also manual adjustments we've made. And what's great is from this stage, we're still retaining that digital link. So if you want to investigate these any further, you can select one of these boxes to take you through to the summary amount. So here it's going to take us through to the summary of those blocked transactions. And then selecting it once again will take us down to the line-by-line report, showing us those transactions in full detail, and also on the right-hand side, giving us that audit information of who blocked them, when, and the description for why. So that's really Alpha VAT in a nutshell. And thank you, Neil. Please let me know if there's anything else you'd like me to go over.
Thank you, Guy.
Okay, so we're now back onto what to do next. So as a bare minimum, you need to make sure you're complying with MTD, and where you are not, you need to find a solution. There will be penalties for non-compliance, so it is very important that you do take action. There are many technology solutions available to cover all budgets and requirements, but it is vital that the technology works seamlessly with your other systems so that you're not adding to your workload. As Neil has mentioned, this is a fantastic opportunity, not just to make your VAT process more efficient, but also to meet other business requirements and demonstrate to HMRC that you take your VAT obligations seriously. So that concludes this part of the webinar, and I'd like to now hand over to questions. Thank you very much.